Hello everyone and welcome back to my Warhammer 40k guides. I am Brady and today I would like to give you my review on the new Chaos Space Marines rules from the Psychic Awakening book, Faith and Fury. So first off, it's been a long couple of days, eh? And second, thanks again to Games Workshop for sending me out a review copy of this book so I can give you guys and gals my competitive perspective on the new rules. The book will be available to purchase this Saturday for those of you who are interested, and it includes rules for Chaos Space Marines, and Black Templars. I have reviews out already for the Space Marine and Black Templars portion of the book, so this video is dedicated to just going over the Chaos Space Marine stuff and giving you my competitive perspective on it. So the Chaos Space Marines received what I would like to call mini supplements for each legion from the Chaos Space Marine Codex, so no Thousand Suns or Death Guard stuff unfortunately. But these mini supplements give new relics, warlord traits, and stratagems to each of the legions, which will help boost them all up a bit in terms of strength in the tabletop game. Some legions did make it out better than others though in my opinion, so in the next segment of this video I will go over some of the new mini supplements, mainly the ones that I think will actually see some competitive play on top tables at major events. And in the following segment I will briefly go over the supplements that I didn't think hit the mark and my reasoning for why I feel that way. So, let's begin. The first legion I wanted to talk about is my favorite of the vanilla Chaos Space Marine legions, and it's the one that I usually use the rules for my Red Legion army, and that is Alpha Legion. Alpha Legion I think made it out the best out of this book. So let's go over some of their new rules that I like and that lead me to believe that this will be the strongest legion from the Chaos Space Marine Codex. Stratagems. The first stratagem that I think will be really strong is Conceal. This stratagem is 2 command points and it allows you to pick an Alpha Legion infantry unit at the beginning of your opponent's shooting phase, and your opponent cannot target that unit unless it is the closest visible target. So you put this on a unit of something like 3 Celestial Obliterators, and they can't be shot at if you have a bunch of cultists or Chaos Space Marines out front to screen for them. And with how much damage 3 Obliterators can put out each turn when you use stuff like Veterans of the Long War, plus Endless Cacophony, and possibly the buffing spells from a Master of Possession, these guys can be your main damage source each turn because they're going to live to see each turn as long as you have chaff to die for them. Think of it almost as like a Riptide in Tau with drones, except instead of having a drone mechanic, you have a can't shoot this unit mechanic as long as stuff is in front of them. You can combine them with a Master of Possession to give them rerolls of 1 to hit and 1 to wound with a spell, while using another spell that allows them to reroll their RNG stats. You could also include a Dark Apostle to give them +1 to hit, and with all of this, the full combo comes out to 36 shots with +1 to wound because of Veterans and Endless Cacophony, +1 to hit, reroll 1s to hit and wound, and reroll their RNG stats. In my opinion, these are the Chaos version of Imperial Fist Centurions, only that they can't be targeted and they can't die as long as you play right. You could, in theory, use this stratagem to get like a melee unit up the board, like Berserkers or something like that, or maybe Possessed, but to be honest, why do that when you can just use it on a shooting unit and start doing damage from turn 1? And also, you can use the Obliterators in the Devastator battery formation, which is from Vigilus Ablaze. And because normally, you don't really start Obliterators on the table because normally you deep strike them in. But with this, because you can start them on the table because you don't have to worry about them dying, they can actually make use of that stratagem that if your opponent moves within 24 inches of them, you can have the Obliterators shoot your opponent at the end of their movement phase. Combine this with like a couple squads of Havocs in the back lines of your list with autocannons that are 48-inch range, and you're going to be able to pick off 1 enemy unit at the end of your opponent's first movement phase if you didn't get to go first. So overall, I think Obliterators are hands down the best unit to use this stratagem with. The next stratagem is Sabotaged Armory. It's 1 command point and used when you destroy an enemy vehicle that can explode. This stratagem makes it so that your opponent gets +3 to the explosion roll and they cannot re-roll the result. So basically, it makes an enemy vehicle explode on a 3+, or at least that's the intention. Rules is written though, if you look at any vehicle's explodes ability, it always states that on a roll of 6 it explodes, not a roll of 6+. So technically, this stratagem currently just makes vehicles explode on a roll of 3 instead of 6. We all know this will get FAQ'd though, because we know this isn't the intention for what Games Workshop wanted, but again, it's just another thing Games Workshop is going to have to FAQ. So anyways, this stratagem can be really good because your Obliterators will usually annihilate any vehicle they touch, so this can be used to get some extra damage in if your opponent decided to castle up in a corner around that vehicle. This works best on stuff like tactical war suits or vehicles that explode for D6 mortal wounds. So if your opponent has any vehicle that explodes for D6 mortal wounds and they have units surrounding it, I'd kill that vehicle first and hope to make it explode and cause a bunch more damage. Your opponent can play around this a little bit though if they know that this stratagem exists, and they can just keep their units outside of the explosion range of all their vehicles, but then you're forcing your opponent's hand and they're not going to have everything they want in the reroll bubbles and stuff like that. So either way, I really like this stratagem. Even just the threat of this stratagem, I really really like it. The next stratagem is called Scrambled Coordinates. This stratagem is one command point and it is used when your opponent goes to deep strike a unit onto the table. And this stratagem makes it so that enemy units have to deep strike outside of 12 inches from any of your units, including units that aren't in Alpha Legion. So if you're souping it up with demons or something, yeah, this stops your opponent from deep striking within 12 inches of any of your models. So stuff like deep striking Assault Centurions or Smash Captains or Gene Stealer Cult, yeah, you get to laugh in their face as they go to place models outside of 12 inches and can't even declare a charge target. So this shuts down current Raven Guard builds pretty hard, and it also shuts down White Scars builds too that use Assault Centurion. And really, it shuts down any deep striking melee army in the game. The next stratagem is called Renescent Infiltration. This stratagem is one command point and allows you to pick up a friendly Alpha Legion infantry unit off the table and place them in reserve. On the following turn, that unit is placed anywhere on the board up to 9 inches away from enemy models. The big use that I can see for this one is if you use Tide of Traders on a unit of cultists to bring them back to 30 and you place them on a table edge, then pick them up and deep strike them again on the following turn anywhere you want on the table using this stratagem. So you could use them to essentially reinforce your obliterator screen. I'm not 100% that this interaction is going to work like this. To be honest, it might not, but that's the first thing that I thought of, so I felt like mentioning it. There's also probably other uses, like being able to take a character or a unit out of a sticky situation so you don't give up a kill point and then like put it in a building in the back corner or something like that. So yeah, this is going to be very useful. The next stratagem is called Ambush and is 2 command points. You use this stratagem when an enemy unit deep strikes on the table. You pick an Alpha Legion infantry unit within 18 inches of that enemy and you can shoot at them as if it were the shooting phase. So this is Auspex Scan on steroids essentially. Use this with your Obliterators or use this with your Havocs or really any of your shooting units. Obliterators would probably be the best though, because they'll just obliterate anything that deep strikes on the table. The next and final stratagem is called We Are Alfarius, and it does probably what you assume it does. You get a second warlord essentially. So after you pick your first warlord and give them a warlord trait, you can then pick another character and give them a warlord trait. You have to use unique warlord traits though. You can't have multiples of the same one on different characters. And that's it for the stratagems. And I literally went over all of them except for one, and even that one is still good. It's the one where you can move your guys before the game begins 9 inches. So in my opinion, every stratagem that Alpha Legion received is actually very beneficial to the army, and it's very practical, and it's something that can be used to help you out in competitive 40k games. And it's not very often either that armies get a supplement that have like a full page of stratagems that are actually useful in competitive builds. But with the build I was talking about earlier, where you take like a unit of 3 obliterators and a bunch of chaff to like protect them and maybe a couple of other shooting units like Havocs or something like that, then yeah, all of these stratagems work really well with that type of build. So now let's go over the Alpha Legion relics. All of them are good, but I'm only going to go over one which is my favorite, and that is Hydra's Whale. This relic can be activated at the start of the battle round, and for that battle round, when your opponent spends a command point, you roll a dice. On a 4+, your opponent spends an extra command point. This can deter your opponent from busting out expensive combos turn 1, or punish them if they decide to do so. And even if your opponent doesn't do it, you're really only taking up 1 relic slot to stop your opponent from doing like a super combo turn 1 or something like that. So kind of like the Explode stratagem, even if it doesn't actually work and make your opponent spend more command points, it can stop them from just spending command points on stratagems altogether, which is also good. At least for that one battle round, but in a game like Warhammer 40k, sometimes one battle round is all you need to swing the game in your favor. As for the Alpha Legion Warlord traits, there are some good ones as well, but again, I'm only going to go over one of them. It's called Clandestine. This Warlord trait makes the bearer -1 to hit when shot at or when in combat. Put this on a Disco Lord, who will now be -2 to hit because of the Alpha Legion trait and this Warlord trait. You can also bring a Dark Apostle to make him another -1 to hit for -3 to hit, and then later on in the game, after the Disco Lord leaves to go do his thing, you can then make something else -1 to hit, like a big blob of cultists or something like that. Or you could even go farther and bring a Sorcerer that's Nurgle and make the Disco Lord Nurgle, and then you can make him -4 to hit. So even stuff like Custodes are going to have a hard time hitting that Disco Lord. And that's it for all the Alpha Legion stuff. Overall, I think they definitely got the most useful stuff from all of the Legion supplements. It's all very practical and useful in competitively built armies. And from the looks of it, I think it's actually really good at combating the current Space Marine meta. Because those Oblits are just going to absolutely destroy Space Marine stuff, especially if the Space Marines can't hit the Oblits back. You also have the anti-deep strike stratagem, which screws over Assault Centurions. You also have the super Auspex scan. There's also the exploding vehicle, so stuff like Iron Hands that have like a castle with a bunch of vehicles. You can make one explode and do a bunch of damage to all the vehicles around it. So yeah, again, all these stratagems are very practical for competitive games. And yeah, again, I think they actually are a good counter to Space Marines, which we kinda need in the meta since Space Marines are running so rampant. And the thing is too, is they get even better against Space Marines when you combine them with Night Lords. So that segues perfectly into Night Lords, so let's go over some of the cool things that they received. For the Night Lord stratagems, let's start with my favorite, which is called Vox Scream. For one command point, you target an enemy unit within 18 inches of a Night Lord's unit, and you can turn off all of that unit's aura abilities. So let's say you're against a Space Marine army with the Chapter Master, who has the relic for an extra 3 inches on all their auras. Well, you can just say no and cancel that out. The best way to do this would be biker units or something like Helldrakes, since they are incredibly fast and can easily get within 18 inches of that Chapter Master on turn 1. And then by turning off the Space Marine rerolls, you hit the army pretty damn hard, especially if you pair this up with a mainly Alpha Legion army, since Alpha Legion stuff is -1 to hit. And modifiers get a lot better when your opponent doesn't have full rerolls like Space Marines do. Chapter Masters aren't the only thing that you can use this on though. You can shut down Tau Commanders with their Master of War ability, you can shut down Dark Shrouds for their -1 to hit aura, you can shut down Calls rerolls, you can shut down any unit that has an aura and shut off those auras. So this stratagem in theory will be good in matchups across the board, but especially good against Space Marines who want to castle up with a Chapter Master. The next stratagem is called Midnight Clad. This stratagem is one command point and activated when a Night Lord's infantry unit is targeted by a shooting attack. That Night Lord's unit is now -1 to hit. So pretty self-explanatory. After you shut down the enemy rerolls, the modifiers become much better, so you put this on a unit that you don't want to die essentially. Hit and run. This stratagem is one command point and allows a Night Lord's unit to charge even after falling back from combat. Again, pretty self-explanatory why this is good, but it becomes amazing when you combine it with the next stratagem. And that stratagem is called We Have Come For You. This stratagem is one command point and activated at the beginning of your movement phase. You pick a friendly Night Lord's infantry unit, and enemy units that are in combat with that unit cannot leave combat. Yes, that's right. No rolling or anything required. Just one command point and you hold the enemy in combat with you. So you could, in theory, charge the enemy screen, hold them there, then on the following turn, leave combat and charge again with hit and run, and then you can hold that new unit in combat. So to me, this makes me think that Night Lords are going to have a very annoying playstyle for their opponents, because they're going to be able to just hop from unit to unit and just hold whatever they want in combat and stop them from shooting. And this also works really well with the next stratagem, which is called Raptor Strike. For 2 command points, one of your jump pack units can get a 3d6 charge out of Deep Strike. So essentially, Night Lords are now Chaos Blood Angels. Combine this with the Raptor Strike formation, which is from Vigilus Ablaze, and you can bring a character that has a Warlord trait to give +2 to charge. So now your Warp Talons or Raptors are only going to need a 7-inch charge, and they can roll 3d6 for that charge. And once they get into combat, they can just hold the enemy there and then bounce around on the following turn. That's not all though. The final stratagem to talk about is called From the Night. This stratagem is one command point and gives your units +2 to charge if they are fully within a terrain feature. So if the situation arises, you can deep strike your Raptors or Warp Talons onto a ground floor of a ruin and get +2 to charge from this stratagem, +2 to charge from that Warlord trait, and a 3d6 charge. And then again, you can bounce from target to target and hold them in combat. You can also make use of this with other deep striking units like Terminators. It is very situational though, and if your opponent knows that this stratagem exists, they can just try to stay away from all of the terrain, and so that way it's going to be hard for you to charge even with the +2. The thing is though, is with boards at tournaments, there's usually enough terrain that no matter what, you're going to be able to find a terrain piece that you can land on and charge from. The problem is hoping that that terrain piece is big enough that you can actually fit your entire unit of Terminators or whatever onto it. But yeah, you can do pretty much the same thing with Terminators, only you can get some shooting in there. You can put some combi plasmas on them or something, which are really good at killing Space Marine stuff, and then you can charge something, leave combat, charge something else, do all the same stuff you do with the Warp Talons and Raptors, except you don't get a 3d6 charge for the Terminators. One thing I haven't mentioned about this combo either that I will now take time to mention is that this combo isn't really the best for putting out damage if you use Warp Talons or Raptors, especially in the Space Marine meta. They're not that good at killing Space Marines. But it is absolutely amazing at being annoying as hell and just tying up enemy Space Marine units. You can make it do a little bit of damage if you bring the Terminators with combi plasmas. That gives the combo a little bit of damage, but to be honest, I'd just use like 1 or 2 units of 15 Raptors and just have them fly around and keep tying stuff up in combat. Also, getting back to the Alpha Legion stuff I talked about earlier and combining them with this Night Lord stuff, well, I think you can see what I'm getting at. You use a unit or 2 of 15 Raptors just to be annoying, hold stuff in combat, and be the closest enemy unit so that your Obliterators are safe from harm essentially. It's an excellent combo in my opinion, and it's one that I think we will see in future top chaos lists. As for relics, I don't really like any of them that much, to be honest. There is the Vox Demonicus, which shuts down enemy auras, but you have to be in close combat with the enemy, so yeah, it's kind of meh. As for the Warlord traits, there's one that I want to show you guys and gals, and that is one piece at a time. This trait allows your Warlord to leave combat and charge. So the guy that comes in with your Raptors that gives them +2 to charge and himself +2 to charge, he can do stupid shenanigans as well. And that's it for the Night Lord stuff. Overall, I think the Night Lords will be best used as allies, ironically, kind of like how Blood Angels were best used as allies for a long time. And I think they pair up incredibly well with Alpha Legion for the reasons I mentioned previously. Moving on to the next Legion, who got some pretty cool rules. Let's go over Emperor's Children. So to be honest, I don't think the stuff Emperor's Children got was as good as Alpha Legion or Night Lords, but I could see some builds with them popping up in the future, so let's go over some of their new stuff. For stratagems, the first one is called Combat Elixirs. This stratagem is 2 command points and used at the beginning of the battle. You pick an Emperor's Children infantry unit and give them either +1 attack, +1 strength, +2 to movement, or +1 toughness. This stratagem can only be used once per battle. So to me, I think this stratagem wants you to pick one unit to be your main damage source and just buff the crap out of it. So personally, I think this is best used on Noise Marines, and that is because of this next stratagem. Excruciating Frequencies. This stratagem is 1 command point and is activated when you choose a Noise Marine unit to shoot with. This stratagem gives their special weapons +1 strength and +1 damage, meaning their sonic blasters are now strength 5 and 2 damage. Combine this with Veterans of the Long War for +1 to wound and Endless Cacophony to shoot twice, and your 20 Noise Marines will absolutely annihilate any Space Marine stuff within their range. Also, because you gave them Combat Elixir, your Noise Marines are toughness 5, and you can bring a Dark Apostle to make the blob -1 to hit, and a Sorcerer to give them a 5-up Feel No Pain with Delightful Agony. And even if your opponent does decide to shoot at those Noise Marines and they end up dying, well, they get to shoot when they die. It's almost like playing an old Inari army in that regard. But again, I think this is kind of gimmicky, and a unit of 20 Noise Marines is really expensive, but I mean, it has potential. Other than this little combo though, I don't really see much going for Emperor's Children, so personally I think they're best to use as an ally for either Alpha Legion, Night Lords, or possibly both. But personally, if I was going to make a Chaos list myself with these new rules, it would be a Spearhead or battalion of Alpha Legion, a battalion of Night Lords, and a battalion of Nurgle Demons for the nasty Plaguebearer screen to protect my Obliterators. That's the combo of armies that I personally think would work the best with these new rules. With that said, I'm skipping over the Emperor's Children's Warlord traits and relics because I don't really see anything that I like too much, to be honest. So that's going to be it for the legions that I like and think we'll see some competitive play on top tables. As for the other legions I didn't talk about that you can find in this book, Word Bearers got some rules that I think are meant to be fluffy, pretty much to help them summon in demons or buff up units like Possessed and other demon units, but I don't think that's going to be all that competitive because the units that got buffed aren't that great in the first place. So I don't think they're really going to see that much play because there's just better stuff you can take, like the Alpha Legion stuff. For World Eaters, it's pretty much the same thing. They got a couple of buffs, like they can make Terminators a little bit better, but they never got a stratagem for like a 3d6 charge or +2 to charge or anything like that. So World Eaters are still going to have a hard time getting into combat, which is their biggest weakness in the first place. And there wasn't really anything that I found in this book that actually helps that. Maybe I missed something. And for Iron Warriors, I actually think they look pretty decent and they're pretty good. But personally, I equate them to being the poor man's Alpha Legion. So in my opinion, why play Iron Warriors when you could just play the new Alpha Legion? That's my thoughts at least. And that's going to be it for the new Legion supplements. There is one more thing to talk about though, which I will briefly go over my thoughts on, and that is the new Demon Weapon Relics. So there are these new relics that any Legion from the Chaos Space Marine Codex can take, and they are taken like normal relics by replacing a certain weapon that a character has. And the thing is though, all of these Demon Weapon Relics have an ability. Some are good and some are okay. And the weapon profiles themselves, from what I can see, are only slight upgrades from the weapons that they actually replace. So I guess you take these Demon Weapon Relics for their abilities, since the main profile on the weapon is only slightly better than the weapon that you replaced. But here's the thing. When you go to attack with your demon weapon, you have to roll a dice. On a 2+, you get the ability that your relic has, and all is fine. But if you roll a 1, you don't get that ability from your relic weapon, and you cannot attack with that relic weapon. So to me, I think this mechanic kills demon weapons, and I'll probably never take one in any of my competitive lists. Because on the off chance you roll a 1 and don't have a command point because maybe it's late in the game, or you blew all your load on turn 1 or turn 2 or something like that, you literally screw yourself over, since not only do you lose out on the relic's ability, but you can't even attack with that relic weapon. Honestly, if the abilities or the weapon profiles were amazing to compensate for the chance of getting screwed over this badly, then I consider taking them. It's like risk versus reward. The reward is good, but the risk is absolutely awful. So I don't think it balances out in my opinion. So personally, again, like I said earlier, I don't think I would use any of the new demon weapon relics, which I do find very unfortunate, because the idea of demon weapons is pretty cool. So anyways, before I end this video, I want to end it on a good note and give my overall review of the new Space Marine stuff, and where I think Chaos Space Marines might fit into the meta going forward. Personally, I think this book was an overall win if you don't mind mixing legions together, like Alpha Legion and Night Lords, or Alpha Legions, Night Lords, and Emperor's Children, or Alpha Legion, Night Lords, and Nurgle Demons. The combos I mentioned in this video I think will be very strong against Marines in particular, and that's the main army in the meta right now. They take up about 25% of the meta. So if you can beat Space Marines, then you're pretty much golden for the most part if you want to go to a tournament. So stuff like Vox Scream absolutely shuts down Chapter Master gun lines, and stuff like Raptors holding units in combat can shut down those gun lines as well. And stuff like denying Deep Strike within 12 inches of your whole army is pretty broken and will straight up shut down like Raven Guard lists that are spamming Assault Centurions, or White Scars lists that are spamming Assault Centurions, or Gene Stealer Cult in general, or any deep striking armies. So I think Chaos Space Marines now have the tools to actually compete in the current meta, as long as this year's chapter approved is nice to them. So again, overall, I think this book is a win for Chaos Space Marine players. And that's going to be it for this video. If you enjoyed it, don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe to the channel for more videos like this. Also check me out on Patreon if you'd like to help support the channel even further. And yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed the video, and I will see you in the next one. Happy wargaming.